And if you come away with one lesson from today, I think that is the one I want you the most to remember. You have to have human agency over your work products. You have to be checking all of the work. Yes, it saves you time, but you can't skip over that step. It is so important to make sure that everything you're getting is accurate and that the words that you're putting out there are not biased just because the machines were. Because at the end of the
Exactly.
day, you're still the one that's going to be held accountable. We're going to be held accountable. We're all going to be held accountable, not the machines.
And that's a good segue to the secondary kind of ethical concern is accountability. And this is something that kind of came up in my research in preparing for this chat and the blog, and that we talked about a lot this week at my bio conference is how do you kind of, what's that fine line of using AI and being transparent about it versus using it kind of just as a resource like you would any other resource on the internet. I think that's kind of where we're still trying to figure out. This is a huge, important component that we really need to work through in academia, in on all the kind of peer-reviewed websites. How much attribution do we give to AI? What kind of helping hand did AI have in writing your article? If it, actually generated text, then you can't take credit for that. Or if it, was just kind of the resource, where it helped you find the articles that you used, do you really need to say that you used it? I think that we're really still figuring that out in our world. We're kind of seeing the creation of these AI SOPs come around more and more, but it is still very much a gray area, and I'm not sure that anyone has officially figured out how to solve this kind of authority or authorship of AI driven content or AI supported content. But it's definitely, there's some serious ethical concerns, and that is especially true because of the kind of secondary piece of this is the hidden risks. Now, as we've been saying, that there is just so much human component needed in AI. And why is that? Because AI has some hidden risks that aren't as overt as everything that we've been talking about. So, Brian, what do we mean by hidden risks? What are hallucinations? Which is a funny term because hallucinations are created from your brain and AI is created from a machine. But explain what we mean by hallucinations and why that is such a risk, especially when it comes to authorship.
Yeah, so hallucinations are a really interesting phenomenon. So, sometimes, AI will make a factual mistake, right? But it can go beyond that and like, create like completely new data, essentially, that isn't true. That's
Yep.
why it's called a hallucination. It's literally like hallucinating something that wasn't a real thing. So imagine the difference between getting George Washington's birthday wrong. Okay, it made a factual mistake. Maybe one of the inputs had the wrong date listed, something like that. Then it could also, spit out, Arnold Schwarzenegger was the 42nd president of the United States. And it's like, whoa, what? No, he was never
Yeah.
the president of any country. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But sometimes AI really does like generate this like completely novel, fake information that is just not matching to reality. And again, if it's not a subject you're very well versed in, most of us are pretty well versed in presidents of the United States of America, but like maybe it was a country you're not familiar with, or maybe it's on a topic of, glass manufacturing. I don't know, anything that you're not that familiar with. It could make up a whole, set of facts that you don't like have any reference to. And you're like, okay, sounds good to me.
And
And
that's the issue
yeah.
is if it's a topic that you are not familiar with and you take it at face value and you're putting it into your research, you are further spreading misinformation. And this is a very serious issue in highly regulated technical industries, especially like the life science world that we operate in. If someone is using that hallucination as true and puts it into their data that people are using to create medicine or to create theories, around, life-saving techniques, that's really, really scary. And I know the NIH and FDA are coming up with some kind of, they have SOPs on their website for AI usage. And that's like a lot of the research that I did preparing for this topic. But it's still very much in that gray area of, how do we identify what's true and what's not true? And, so perfect example of how hallucination can kind of impact you. And now this is like so far askew from, life-saving medicine, but just to kind of give you a sense. Okay, so my husband and I watch Handmaid's Tale. And yeah, as you know, season 6 just came out. Very long time after season 5 came out. So I watched the recap, but I just couldn't remember like, full details of season 5 because it came out so long ago. So I Googled like season 5 recap of Handmaid's Tale, and it created this recap for me that was essentially a hallucination and incidentally ruined season 6 for me because it had really not, it had taken recent data and put together this recap that involves season 5 material and season 6 material and created this fictitious season 5 that never happened. And because the art of deduction, figured out what the one of the major things in this season 5 recap that I knew didn't happen actually happens in season 6. And process of deduction, I figured it out. So this just kind of ruined the show for me, which isn't a huge deal. But take that scenario and put that into medicine or technology or something that has to do with lives and finances or anything really personal to you. That's really freaking scary.
Yeah, that is, first of all, I think you're underplaying what a big deal it is to have a season of your TV show ruined. So let's just put that out
True,
there.
true.
But yeah, there's another phenomenon recently where people are finding citations in papers that have been partially generated by AI to source materials that don't exist, like
It's
literally made
crazy.
up papers.
It's
And
crazy.
so you really, again, if you're sourcing, a bibliography, citations, you have to be checking these links and these citations to make sure that you not only is the material right, but the sources exist.
I know.
Don't skimp on that. Make sure you are actually putting in the time to make sure the research sources are correct, because you don't want to undermine all of your hard, valuable work by creating hallucinated papers that don't exist and then getting caught.
Yeah, exactly. Or, I think a lot of times what happens is you realize these hallucinations once you've already like gotten started or after the fact. Very rarely do you figure out the hallucination right away. You don't figure it out until you've gone through more of the process. So if you're looking at ChatGPT and you see those little links next to the data it's spit out, click those links. I cannot emphasize that enough. So let's talk about how to spot AI generated content. We're going to rattle these off and feel free to pop yours in the comments below. All right, so one of the telltale signs for me is the use of emojis. I live in kind of a more formal world, so people don't really use emojis where I reside, or if they do, it's really just on like social media to attract attention. But I always know when someone has used AI because the title always has an emoji before the title, and there's always like emojis within the text. And like the bullet points are always emojis. A lot of times they're the blue diamond. So that's one that I always know. How about you, Brian? What's yours?
Yeah, I think another one to be very careful about is if you're dealing with any topic where knowledge of personal experiences is important, and there aren't any of those, that's a good indication that maybe this was AI generated. So, for example, if it's a review of a restaurant, but like the details of the food are very generic sounding, or the atmosphere, or like it doesn't sound like this
That's a
person
good
has
point.
necessarily ever been to this place in order to write this article, well, maybe that's because they weren't in that place because they're a robot.
Yeah, it's a good one. Thinking on a grammatical sense, I'm sure everybody knows this by now, but the good old M dash, which Brian and I are crying about because as elder millennials, the M dash is like infiltrated into my brain. And now I'm like literally going through and deleting the M dash when I write something because it seems like such a telltale sign of AI. And hopefully by now we've helped you understand why that is, because so many people use the M dash, especially the like majority of working people in this world are millennials and Gen Xers, and we're all fans of the M dash. So AI has taken that, synthesized it, and it's always using M dashes. So that's just like a little bit of a sad one for me because I did love the M dash. What else, Brian?
Well, I'm just so you know, I'm taking my power back, and I'm still using the M dash, whether or
Me
not
too.
I'm just doing it. I'm doing it. But so another one besides that you should be looking for is like formulaic sentence structures. So if you see a certain kind of sentence, like for example, like this rather than that, and you see that like repeated a few times in the paragraph or in the copy, a few paragraphs of copy, the AI will tend to write in those kinds of generic repetitive patterns. So watching out for language patterns is a good way to maybe catch AI. And something, Lauren, I think we should attach to all of this with an asterisk is like one of these things in isolation may not be a sign of AI writing. It may just be the particulars of the particular piece or the writer. But if you start seeing all of these together in like
Yeah,
one piece, that's a
yeah,
really big
exactly.
clue that this is an AI generated piece.
Yeah, exactly. Another one that I think probably has caught a lot of people's eye now is AI does love to talk in bullets. So you'll
Mhm.
often see bullets with like two or three words bolded and then an explanation sentence, which I realized I kind of had something like that for this piece for the description of this of talk. So I was like, oh no, I hope people don't think that I wrote it. But that is another point with all of this is like we can't go through life worrying that people thought we AI wrote something. If your intentions are pure and true and you have not used AI, hopefully that will come out in your work, because there are so many things that AI cannot replicate, as Brian said, number one being that personal experience. So as much as writers, as we're trying to combat the influx of AI, we also do need to, like Brian said, take our power back and not over concern ourselves with, does this sound like AI? So that's a great segue to our final topic, which is, like when to use it and when to leave the writing to the human. So I think we can safely start by saying any personal experience absolutely needs to be written by a human, that you just cannot replicate that. What else, Brian? When do you think we should use it? As your specialty is really SEO. Is there anything in there that you think AI would be useful for?
Yeah, I think with AI in SEO, you can use it to get if you're writing, let's say, a long form article, you can use it to help with thoughts on your first draft. So you can use it to help you get research together. You can help use it to help outline the blog draft. You can ask for more details on certain topics if you need things filled in. And then like you can take that all together and craft a first draft out of all of that data that it's put for you. But I think, the more specific and the more experience you need to have for a given, topic, the less that's going to be helpful. Like the more you're going to have to really rely on your own knowledge, your own experience, or your own, but if I'm writing a very generic, AI, a SEO 101 article, I'll probably have it help me with structure and topical ideas, keywords, things like that.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we always suggest with AI, and that we have been suggesting this since we first started talking about this, is the personalization component.
Mhm.
This is probably like the old form of mail merging, if you're, old enough to know what that is. This is, using generative AI on platforms like LinkedIn to help you personalize, but that's just an easy peasy time saver. A lot of times if you open a message and someone's written to you, it'll suggest various like texts to respond, and it'll include the person's name, which is just a nice touch. So even if you don't use the full text that AI has given you, at least you have this personalization component. And there's many ways to kind of personalize through various platforms, but I think that's a huge time saver. And I think anything kind of where AI can replace human work with kind of an automation component, that's worth it, as long as there's kind of no human or voice component that is needed. And that's really where you don't want to sacrifice not just the human component, but like your voice, your brand personality. Those are all things that you can't, no matter what AI tells you, guys, like it cannot replicate your voice, your tone. Obviously, accuracy and personal experience is one thing. But, as writers, one of the biggest things that we credit ourselves is understanding who you are, who your company is, how you talk, what you say. And that's truly not something that AI has the capacity to do, nor will it ever. Because that's just not how the language models are built, and that is okay. And we should you know skirt back to our how to spot AI generated content. Another way to spot it is if the voice changes. If the topic
Mm.
goes from like starting with emojis and smiling faces to an academic article voice, like that usually doesn't have that drastic of a tone switch, but really creating something that reflects the full tone and voice of your company, yourself, that's really hard. Um, so what do we think? What's the, period at the end of the sentence for today's talk? I think, Brian, you put it perfectly. If we're gonna tell you anything, use AI for the time saving, for the productivity, for the efficiency, but no, there's always more work to be done on the downstream, on the upstream. If for every time saving efficiency measure, when you're first getting started, there is always human work to be done. You always have to put your personal touch, your accuracy checking, on every component. And yeah, we're not going to lie to you, we use it all the time. but you will never get anything from me that is a soup to nuts AI that is, not been fact checked, rewritten, redone. I will never ever do that. And I hope that inspires you to never ever do that. It's fine to use it, but don't ever replace it for your human voice.
Yeah,
Brian?
that's so great, Lauren. That is a great summation, and I'll add to retouch on a point you brought up earlier. I'm a big fan of all the wisdom I've ever learned. I learned in kindergarten, kind of approaches to things, and so just be a good person and be transparent. If you use AI, say you use
Yes,
AI. If a piece is largely written by AI, say the piece is largely written by AI. If you use it for research, just be transparent, own it. We're all using it. Everybody knows it. It's fine. But don't be sneaky. Don't steal people's work. Don't plagiarize. Just do all the good people things that you're used to doing, and I think you'll be okay.
exactly. And with that, we will sign off and we'd love to hear your comments. So send us a DM. You guys know where to find us, but we would love to hear from you on this topic. And if it feels like something you'd like to explore more, send us ideas because this is really fascinating to us. So thanks, guys, for chiming in.
Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it.